Alrighty, welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. We'll be talking about library appraisal programs. My name is Charlie Taylor, and I am one of the continuing education consultants at KDLA, and I'm going to be moderating this session today, sort of facilitating it, helping out. And if you have any technical issues, I'll be the one to help you with those as well. Please feel free to use the chat to let me know if you have any technical issues. And it looks like a bunch of you have already found the chat, which is great. If you haven't yet, you'll just look in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and you'll see a purple arrow, and click that to expand a side panel that'll open up on the right-hand side of your screen. And then at the very bottom, bubble. And you can just chat in there, just saying hi to everybody to show where it is. And feel free to use that for, as I said, any technical issues, if you have any questions for our presenters, anything like that, if you just want to share what you're doing at your library, anything along those lines. So, all right. The PDF of today's slides is available in Blackboard Learn under the PDFs and slides section at the very bottom. After the webinar is over, probably in the next day or so, that will go away. So if you haven't already and you want to go ahead and download the slides, I'd encourage you to do that sooner rather than later. And we are live captioning this webinar. You will see a message at the top of your screen asking you if you'd like to see captions within Collaborate. You can say yes or no to that, whichever you prefer. You can also use this link that I've just put in the chat, a stream text link, and that will open up the captioning in a separate window that you can manipulate. You can change the font size, all kinds of things. So up to you if you'd like to use either one of those. So I think that's all the housekeeping information that I have to get us started. I'd like to just, again, welcome everyone and encourage you to use that chat function to ask any questions or share your ideas or thoughts on the programs we're going to talk about today. And we are going to start with Ms. Charlene Hopkins from the Pike County Public Library District. And Charlene, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute and come on, and you can take over.
Thank you, Charlie. It's my first time doing this, so if I have any stumbling blocks, I'll see that you get me through it. The antique appraisals that we have, I'm getting on here today to talk to you about what works for us. And hopefully this will give you some ideas if you think this will work for your library. I know I've been contacted through many of the libraries in the state about what worked for me, and I've talked to them one-on-one. I've sent them information, and of course my information will be on here, my emails on here. If you have any questions after the webinar, just let me know. We started this program back in 2005. I just started here, and there's several reasons why I've always had an interest in antiques. The photographs that you'll see during this presentation have been taken during the years here. We have used the same people over and over. They've been here every year except for the past, well, this past year they were here, but before that we were closed 2 years because of the pandemic, and people really miss that. So we were happy to have them back this past year. We always have ours on the third Thursday in October, and it's always easier to say than trying to figure out a date and having to tell people that. So anyway, we'll get going with the presentation. Put any of the questions you may have into the chat, or you can stop and we'll discuss them while the slides are being presented. Mountaineer auctions are who we use, and I happened to run into these. I had gone to an antique appraisal program that they had in West Virginia, and it gave me the idea. I started working here. I've been here, this will be my 23rd year, but I had just come in, and I was kind of new at doing programs, but I thought this would be a really good program to have at the libraries, and I really didn't know if it will cost a lot of money, or because we are free public library and we like to give it uh, everything we have, we like to do it for free. So budgeting, I came back with the idea to the director, and she says, I think it will be a great idea. I don't know what you would do to get it started, but at least we'll try. So I'm telling you that you can start your program, and it's like any other program that you're going to have. Some it works well with, some it doesn't. There's a lot of work to it, but it's the work of the day. Once you get established in this, and it's just like repeating over it and over. So I'm going to go through some do's and don'ts of what worked for me when we started, how we got it going, how to reach out to the people you want to reach to for this. And that has to do with a lot of different aspects of the program that we'll discuss as we go through the slides. But my auctioneers are Roger Mullins and his son Steve Mullins, and they come here from Clendenin, West Virginia, which is roughly 130 miles from Pikeville. So that's a long way that they're traveling just to come here. I've talked to them. I asked for their blessing in doing this webinar, and so that we'd be able to use their photographs and the information. And I got some great information back from them. One was, and I'll quote this, we do limited numbers of appraisals outside of our daily work with South Charleston Antique Malls and our Mountaineer Auction Gallery, but we always look forward to the annual Antique Appraisal Fair at the library. The professionalism of the library staff provides, and the quality of people and items we have the opportunity to be exposed to every year. And that means a lot, because you want to make a good impression with having your appraisals, and that's one of the appraisers are the hardest to find to do this, that will do you a professional job yet have a good time doing it. And so I'll give you some ideas on how to find appraisers and what to do to keep them coming back to you. This slide here is one of the reasons why, and Charlie, these slides are so small, I don't know if I can make them any bigger, why we got started with the program. I work as a special collections librarian. I do the genealogy and history, and I'm in the nonfiction area. So I noticed a great deal of books that are being checked out on a regular basis. They're coming in, they're wanting to find out about their antiques, or everybody that has something old, they think it's a treasure, and they're going to find out how much it is, and they're going to retire, but that don't always happen. People are finding family heirlooms that are coming in. They're handed down family to family, which to me, those items are priceless. In our areas, we have a lot of flea marketing. They're setting up yard sales and flea markets all over the place. And, it's our nature to love junk. And a lot of junk is a lot of treasures that people just are eliminating from their houses. They're getting rid of it. There's a lot of estate sales. So a lot of times people get something and they really don't know what it's worth. And so that is the biggest reason that we actually started this, is because it's going to help people determine what is a treasure and what is junk. And this program has been excellent. The hardest thing that I think you'll do if you're going to attempt to start this in the library is to find local appraisers. And there's a lot of places that you can search. Check out auctions. A lot of people are auctioneers, are also, some are certified, some are not, but yet they have the ability to do a pretty accurate appraisal. They can search online resources for close by auctioneers. People who get online and they're watching things like storage wars when they take these items out that they found in a storage building they've purchased to see how much it's worth. People who have jewelry stores, antique stores, um, flea market items, you'll find a lot of people there who can actually give their idea of an appraisal. But now, whether they're certified, whether they know what they're doing, if I'm doing it in the library, I would probably want to have some justification that the auctioneers are accredited in some way. So I would suggest trying to find at least one appraiser who is accredited with the ISA, and that is the International Appraisers Program. They're a qualified ISA educator or appraisal is educated to be able to provide you with an accurate and complete appraisal. Like, it's just like a medical issue. And I use that as an example. If somebody tells you something and it's not what you want, you're going to go to get a second opinion. And it's the same thing. You've got an item that you think may be valued at a certain item or a certain price, I'm sorry, then you want to get a second opinion. So in this library, when we do the appraisals, we only give a verbal estimate, and that's free of charge. There's no charge for anything that we do here. We do a verbal for two reasons. Number one, we can put more people through for the amount of time that we have. Plus, it would take additional people if they wanted a written appraisal. So we are not here to give you a written appraisal, but now the auctioneers or the appraisers that we have can meet with you after the appraisal program. We've had a lot that will go ahead and set up appointments for them to come out and look at things in their home. Maybe some items are just too big to get here, and bringing pictures in does the items is not does not do justification for the item that they're appraising. So they will schedule meetings outside that to have those appraised. Some of the items that, such as the musical instruments, they may require some outside, more in-depth research. I think he's here holding a violin, and that was dated, very dated. And sometimes the inside, they'll have writing on the inside of those that they have to use more advanced equipment to find out exactly what those are actually appraised for. So that happens sometimes, but not very often. Most everyone that he's actually put through here, he's been able to give an estimate at the time rather than outside appraisals. One of the places that you can go to online, if you're looking, go to auctions. And I use this quite a bit just for my own good. It'll tell you the different states and the counties in which they are having auctions. They have auction houses. So a lot of times you can find appraisers who you may be able to get to come into your library that would be doing it on the side that will come out other than just the auction houses. I look at this a lot, and when I say go to auctions, go to auctions. You'll run into people there, and we invite people when they come here when they're doing the appraisals. You don't really have to have an item to come to watch the program. So we have a lot of people who would like to, but they don't have items, but they want to come by and see. I had contacted the Antique Roadshow before I actually found these auctioneers or to come in and do the hours. And of course, our city was not big enough. I don't even think Lexington has it. Louisville, I think, was the closest in Kentucky that the Antique Roadshow comes to. So this is sort of like the Antique Roadshow, but we're not associated with them whatsoever. But we do have a lot of people ask, why don't you have the Antique Roadshow here? And it's because our city we're not hardly big enough yet. Selecting a date and time. This would depend all on your library. We have a lot of things to take into consideration. First of all, who's going to be the target audience that you're going to reach out to come to this program? And most people that are going to be coming to the program are older people, people who like to spend their weekends going out to flea markets and bargain houses and auctions. And so Saturday definitely did not work for us. I discussed this with the appraisers to get their opinions, and that's one of the things that they helped me in making a decision as to what day would be the best and what time of day would be the best. The day, they selected Thursday because it was more convenient. It's close to the weekend. People are over the hump day. We never hardly have programs on Wednesday because of church night, and you're not going to get a big turnout if you did. The date that suited us best was Thursday. And then when we got to discussing the time of day, Thursday is a work day for people. So we selected to have ours from 3 to 7. That gives the appraisers time to get here, which is 130 miles. Then by having it until 7, it gives those people that work until 5 time to get here with their items. And so we have kept this date and time since day one. By having it the third Thursday in October, because when I'm out and I see people and they'll say, when are the appraisers coming? I can always say the third Thursday in October. So we've kept that, and it rings a bell when people know it's going to be in the fall. It's whether it's inside or out. It's going to be fairly chance of having decent weather. They can travel to get here. And so that's what worked with us. But it depends. This is a program that it's not like a class that you're teaching. It's something that's more educating the people. And you'll see here in this photograph, the old bicycle. When they bring these in, they tell time periods. They tell a little bit of the history. So that's what people really like when they bring pieces in. They want to know history. Some people, the items will be priceless, but the history is what they're looking for at that. We discussed a little bit of this, that they only do verbal appraisals, and all the appraisals are free. Now, we do have a tip jar for anybody who wants to leave an extra tip for them, and there's quite a few people who do. A little bit in this picture, when we look at this, you see they're holding guns. People say, can I bring this or can I bring that? We welcome guns because guns are a big part of history here in the county. A lot of them are passed down through families. We've had a tremendous amount of those, but we specify when they pick up that ticket to please let us know you're bringing a gun. It has to be in a holster, or it has to be wrapped, unloaded, and of all the years, we've never had any problems with any kind of weapon like that. But we let them know ahead of time. Where do we start? Now, this would be strictly up to you, how you are going to um, how you are going to do your program. You're going to give out tickets in advance. Are you going to do a sign-up sheet? We give tickets, and by giving out a ticket, I usually make 100 tickets. So I know how many tickets that I have given out. So I know I have from 3 o'clock in the evening to 7 o'clock at night. So I decide how many items that we can allow each patron to bring for the time amount that we have. And I usually say 2, but as long as we are running on schedule, if that person that has 2 items wants to bring a third item, as long as they're not aligned, they can take it back through. But if we do 2 at a time, and then the next person will be able to step up. And it gives us a little bit of time for people to break in between and not have to sit and wait so long. If I didn't, my grandmother's not here, but if I gave her a ticket to bring something to the antique appraisal, she would probably bring every whatnot she owned in her house. And that would take up all of our time. So we have to set limits on what we're giving them to bring at the time. Some items they're too huge to bring. We have people who has chest of drawers and things like that. They can bring photographs, but we have to limit those to 2 at a time until all the tickets we have are given out. The tickets, as we're giving them out, and you can see here's the little ticket we use, and that tells me the number of patrons who picked up a ticket to come to the appraisal program. Now, when they get to the appraisal program, we have a sign-in sheet. So it's not called by their number. So it's first come, first serve. As soon as they start coming in, we put their name down, and it's called by that. So I know the amount of people who have tickets, and then we can allow some walk-ins as long as they have a library card. So these tickets are given out to library patrons who have a library card. And when I publicize this in the newspaper, I always say you need to have a library card. So the ones that don't have a library card, from the time I start advertising it, they have that length of time to come in and apply for a library card. So that just adds additional information. If something were to happen to someone while they were here, then I'd have someone to call. So about all of our programs will require a library card, and that's for their own safety. How many appraisers do you need? That really depends on how long you are going to have the program. If you put an all-day program and you had 2 appraisers, you're going to be in trouble because it's going to wear them down. We have 2 and sometimes 3 appraisers here. This will allow the appraisers to look at the items that they are more experienced with. In other words, I've been with them long enough that I know if you bring in a painting, then I'm going to let Steve, the younger with the ISA, I'm going to let him look at that. The more old vintage photograph or the items that they're going to bring in, Mr. Mullins is far beyond years in his experience with those. The things you find in the barns and things that are handed down through family, they each specialize, but then it gives them a chance to talk about the history of each item that they're given, and it allows the line to move a little bit smoother. So if you come in and it's your time to go up, but I want you to go to a certain appraiser, then I may tell you I'd rather for you to go here. And I've never had a problem with them saying, well, I need to be next. you know. So I try to do the best that I can to send them to the appraiser that I feel like has a little bit more experience in what they're looking at it for as far as the item goes. Do's and don'ts. Um, there's a lot of do's and don'ts that I would probably change a few more things. These are only a few things. Collections such as coins. Now, you see here he's bringing in a cookie tin with a lot of money in there. They're not going to have a chance, no matter what, to go through every piece of coin that you have. They will look at those. They will look at and pull out something that is more uh, easier for them to do as a collection. Uh, the the way you bring it in is presented makes it a little bit easier. Um, so money is one thing. We've had items of artifacts, arrowheads, belt buckles. Uh, Most of the time, they will pick 3 or 4 out and give you that little bit more background on it. But they're not going to say they're not going to have time to do every coin. We have a lot of stuff brought in from the Civil War. Here in this photograph, you will see a photograph of a man and a woman. And when they look at these photographs, we have a lot of people who think they're oil paintings, but they might be a watercolor. They give you their opinions. They'll tell you history about them. But in this particular one, I included it in here because this, the paper there on the lower side told a little bit about that photograph in itself. And it was so faded that they really could not see that without having to put it under a light. And when they did, it told a little bit about the history. So they discover a lot of things about items, and they'll point out things that have markings on them, and they tell you a little bit about the history. But items like that are more sentimental than they would be of value. But we see people who are going into estate sales that will actually buy that because it's aged, it's old, and it's beautiful. On the other side, you'll see a lady here who has a lot of toys. And we do a lot of toys, and they're usually as collections. Uh, she always comes and she always has her boxes, and they'll explain why it's important to have boxes. And to keep your original things. This past year, I saw more comic books coming through than I've ever seen. And so we decided at that point that what we were going to do was to include this year, we are adding to not only antiques, appraisals of the antiques, we're adding vintage, and we're also going to add collections, because a lot of collections that you have now are very expensive and prices are going up every day. So we're hoping to include more of that in with the antiques, so that if you do have a nice collection of something, then you'll feel like you ought to bring it even though it's not an antique. So we're going to do that, and we hope to add maybe an hour or so more time on our program coming up, and that will be the 3rd October in this month. So 3rd Thursday in October, I'm sorry. So that's about it. I hope I've not run over time. But if you have any questions, get in touch with me. I'll be more than happy to help you all. If you want to, feel free to drop by the 3rd Thursday in October and see what we're doing here. And if there's anything I can help you more with, just let me know. And I'm excited to see the other portion of this, because we've never considered it as an online appraisal program.
Charlene, thank you so much. And we actually do have a couple of questions. Shanna has asked, when do you hand out the tickets?
Well, actually, I start mine probably a month before. I'll actually put it in the newspaper that we're getting ready for that. Um, the newspaper here they're so wonderful to work with us. I do all my write-ups for it, so they do it exactly the way I do. If you want to send a flyer, they probably want to charge you as a ad for that. So I do all of my publicity for the programs that I do, and I'll run that about 6 weeks prior to, and then we have people who start calling in and reserving tickets or coming by and picking those tickets up. So I would say a good time period will be within the first time I did it about 2 months. But if you do it too far ahead of time, they're going to forget about it. So you're going to have to send out that second message or have somebody get on the phone and call them. But after you have your first one, then you can decide by that. But 6 weeks is good because that gives them 6 whole weeks to get their tickets and to pass the word that you are doing it.
Sounds good. And I actually had a question myself. When the idea was brought up to do this webinar, um, our state librarian actually had a story from the past, and he's been a librarian forever, so I don't know how long ago this was. But he said that a library had done a program similar to this, and that whoever the appraiser um, was actually making offers to buy the things that they were appraising. And of course, we know that that would go against, what they're there to do, and their ethical standards. So I was wondering if you have any kind of contract with your appraisers, where it stipulates that they can't do stuff like that, or just any kind of formal document.
I don't have a formal document, but I can get it anytime. But we do advertise that this is strictly an appraisal. There is nothing bought or sold on our property. Now, like I said before, we have had some of the people, we've had a couple people I know of who have contacted them and have gone there to their business, but that would have nothing to do with us here. So no, we do not allow that, and we do have it posted that this is not a sale or trade.
Great, great. Just wanted to make sure that I asked that. I know he was concerned. Uh, and Shanna had a follow-up question. Wanted to know if you've ever handed out all 100 tickets.
We always exceed the limit. So we always do, and we put a waiting list on that. I can't think of not one year we didn't hand out 100 tickets.
Wow, that is awesome.
Of the 100 tickets, now I'll tell you, the 100 tickets, not all of those 100 people are going to show up. So you're going to lose probably 15–20% that has something come up or something popped in, or they're sick, or they can't get here, or they simply forgot. And, you know, uh, so we have run into that. But it gives us an idea of how many more on that waiting list we're going to be able to put through, or how many walk-ins, or how many people will come back with third items that they're going to go back through. We have some people who come just to watch. Now, the way we do it, now that we have the bigger library, when we started out, we didn't have bigger space, but we do. We have a holding room. In the holding room, we have people, as they sign in, they go into a holding. We have big screen TVs. They are televising what the appraisers are doing so that we can only have a couple people in at a time where the appraisals are being held. So it's televised, they can watch. We've had, for security purposes, we have had a few that we have just had to turn off the audio because the items may have been a little bit more, or we didn't want certain people to find out that somebody had certain items and what they were valued at. So we have the authority to stop the audio so that they can see it, but they can't understand what the appraisers are actually doing or what they're selling or what they're appraising it for. So that's just security for a little old woman who might live by herself. So We try to watch, we try to be aware of everything around us, even if it's somebody coming in that's just going to watch the appraisals. But we take every precaution, and I think people feel comfortable that we're doing that. Um,
Sounds great. And Shanna, I will work with Charlene to see. Charlene, Shanna's asking if she can see one of the write-ups that you've done for your paper. So maybe you could email that to me if you're willing to, and I could send it out to the attendees.
I certainly can, or they can email me and I'll send it directly to them. We usually use the Appalachian News Express, and it just tells a little bit about it and how they can get tickets and when we're starting. And we have a sign-up sheet, so I'm monitoring that regularly. We have several people are repeats from day one. They're here every year. They live all year long to find antiques so they can bring them to our antique show. But it's just a really fun program. So,
Great.
and I really like to see the other libraries around doing that. And I'll help in any way that I can. If they have questions, email me directly. But I'll drop you one of the newspapers in that we've actually put that in, and a couple flyers that I've made. I don't know why I didn't include those. I guess I wasn't thinking. So,
That's okay. We'll get it
but
out.
anyway,
Yeah. And one last question. About how many people do you usually have work in the event? How many library staff?
um, we usually have, well, we have someone who's filming it, so we do have that, and I apologize we didn't get the clips. We've just got a lot going on right now at the library. So we have the photographer, we have someone taking pictures, someone doing that. We have someone who is usually 2 to 3 registering them in and getting them set up. So you can do it with limited staff if you needed to, as long as you got someone at the door who's taking them in and out, um, working with them, making sure everybody's got in the right spot. But that really depends on how much staff you have and how much time you're going to be doing it. But I have a lot of volunteers, like my book group. I have some volunteers who come in and help, and then they like to bring their own too, so they hang around and help people get in and out. One of the things that I suggest not doing is all during the year we have people bring antiques in, or they want our opinion. We're not here to give our opinion. We are not appraisers. And so they will come in all year long. I don't even give my opinion. I just say, grab a ticket. It may be worth something. We'll find out, but we don't do that. If we did, I'd have people here every day. Just the other day, I had someone pull in and been to an estate sale and had like 4 or 5 framed photographs they wanted me to go out to the car and look at. So no, we do not give our personal opinion on anybody's antiques. And
Sounds great. All right. Well, I'm going to move us on to our next presenter. I want to have plenty of time for her. So thank you so much, Charlene. And
okay,
yeah, thank you so much. You did a great job. Yay.
you're welcome. Anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you. And give me just 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing. And Mallory, if you'd like to go ahead and bring up your camera and say hi to everyone. Our next presenter is Mallory Metzger. She is the Marketing and Program Coordinator from the Hackley Public Library, which I hope I'm saying this right, is in Muskegon, Wisconsin, or Muskegon, Michigan, not Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
That is okay. No, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and to kind of share about our experience with a virtual appraisal program. It was new for us. We had never done something like this before. I had never done something like this before, so it was definitely fun. And so I'm very excited to be able to share that with you guys, just kind of the experience that we had with it. So I will turn off my camera now so it won't be a distraction. And Charlie, if you want to pull up the PowerPoint, that'd be great. And thank you just again so much for having me. So I'm really excited. All right, so the appraisal program that we had at Hackley Public Library, it was a virtual program that we had in April of 2021. And it was a little bit longer of a program than we typically have. Typically, programs for us are about an hour to an hour and a half, but this was a 2-hour program, and the time definitely flew by. You know, it was absolutely necessary to have a longer program for this type of thing, and it was just a really cool experience, and everyone that participated within the community enjoyed it. It was, I think, something that most of our patrons who participated in it, it was new for them. They had never done something like this before. So it was just kind of fun all around. And so just to kind of talk about how this program came about, you know, asking the question of how did we find this appraiser? And the answer is he actually found us. So the appraiser that we worked with, his name is Mike Ivankovich, excuse me, and he's based out of Pennsylvania. And so how he reached us was through email. You know, he is actually a presenter that has worked with other organizations and libraries, I think all across the country. And so he sends out emails to places and organizations that he feels might be a good setting for a virtual program or an in-person program. And just to kind of talk a little bit about Mike's background, in case anyone is ever interested in looking up information or working with him, he has been involved in the antiques and collectibles business for more than 40 years. He lectures frequently for diverse groups. He is also an author of more than 20 books and ebooks in his areas of specialty. And some of those areas of specialty include auctioning, appraisals. He is also a radio host. He hosts a show called What's It Worth on the radio, based out of Philadelphia. And he's a professional appraiser, specializing in estate appraisals, insurance appraisals, inheritance, charitable donation appraisals, legal purposes, and just kind of a variety of all of these great appraisal programs. And so he was really a great person to work with for this presentation. He had a lot of excellent insight. He was able to, you know, give a lot of great feedback to people as well. And so it was definitely very fun working with him and very laid back. You know, sometimes working with virtual programs, it can be a little daunting because of the technical aspect, but he absolutely made it very easy. And in addition to that, he had a great layout of what the program would entail, kind of like step by step, what would be talked about first, what would follow. And so it was really, really nice working with him. And so as far as the interest in the program went, we definitely had a lot of interest for this program. As I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of the people that participated in this program with us within our community, it was something new for them, something that they hadn't done before. It was intriguing, it was kind of fun. And of course, you know, everyone has something at home that they've maybe always wondered about. Oh, I wonder what this might be worth. I wonder what the history might be about it. So it was something kind of cool for everyone to kind of jump in and kind of dabble into seeing what some of their items might be worth, or even kind of if there's a story behind it. And so for this particular program, we did have registration open for people that wanted to share items, but we also had registration open for people that just wanted to be a viewer. You know, almost as if watching the Antiques Roadshow on television, only it's geared more towards, you know, watching, you know, people within your community and kind of seeing all the fun things that they have. And so we did have registration available for both people that were sharing and for those just watching. And the way that we went about conducting registration was by using a Google form. And for those that, you know, are familiar with using Google Forms, we love them. They seem to work very well for us when it comes to registration for programming. They're easy to curate, and they're also very easy to monitor. Now, even though we had registrants who shared items and registrants who didn't, we just used one Google form. And how we laid it out in the description was explaining, that if you would like to share items, to please list your items at the bottom. And if you didn't, then you didn't need to provide any information for that. All you would need to do is provide your name and email. So just to kind of confirm again what we did, we had one Google form, and you would have to provide your name and your email address. Those were 2 required fields, but there were 2 spaces available at the bottom for you to list an item or 2 if you would like to have an item appraised. And I'll talk a little bit more about it later too, but the limit that we had for each person was they could list up to 2 items to be appraised. And as I mentioned, it was actually quite easy to monitor the Google form. You might think, oh, it'll be a little bit tricky because how are you, monitoring how many people are wanting to share or, versus just viewing. But what I would do is I would just keep track of how many people were registering to share items, because that was really where we had to focus on capacity limits. For those that were registering just to view it, really the capacity could be, endless to a certain extent, because there wouldn't be any need for them to share any items. But once we did reach the capacity of who wanted to share an item, I closed that registration form and then just opened up a brand new one, kind of, entailing that this was specifically geared towards people who were just interested in being a viewer of the program. However, I did leave a space available at the bottom of that form for someone to list an item, just in case time would allow. And also, kind of as our previous presenter mentioned, not everyone that registers or gets a ticket comes. So you always have to keep that in mind as well. And so having that space available still for people to, list an item just in case time allows or in case a space becomes available, it was definitely something that helped us actually in the long run, because we ended up not having everyone who originally registered join in for the program. So we were able to have some of those that listed extra items just in case they were able to share about those. But it was, again, just to kind of wrap up with the Google form, it was quite easy to use and very easy to monitor. And as far as advertising goes, we really didn't have to do a lot of extra advertising for this particular program. As I mentioned, it's kind of a hot topic. I think a lot of people are very intrigued with the idea of finding out, what things might be worth or their history. So we really didn't have to curate our advertisement into, special fields, but rather we just kind of followed suit with what, we typically do with advertising. For this one's, for example, we had our flyers, of course, that we have in-house here at Hackley Library, but also around the community. We also have our quarterly newsletter that is printed and distributed out to homes within our service district. And in addition to that, an e-newsletter version that's sent out through email. We also have Hackley Library's online calendar on the website that we shared, information about this program on. We also shared it to local online calendars, to our social media. Something else that, I'm really grateful for is that we do have a pretty good relationship with a local television network that we're able to share programs about, and I was able to talk about this one, plus also sharing on the radio, through radio interviews as well as radio spots. And then also just the good old-fashioned, board on the front steps. We have a sandwich board. I was able to feature this program on that for a little while, and that definitely helped to bring in some foot traffic, asking about this particular program as well, which was really nice. And with this particular appraiser that we worked with, he was really wonderful, as I mentioned, about kind of setting up who would be in charge of what and who would do what during the program. Hackley Library was in charge of the marketing and promotions for the program, as well as for, handling all of the registration. And then in addition to that, setting up the virtual platform for which this program would go through, which then leads me to the platform that we used. And we did use Zoom. Zoom is something that a lot of people do use for programming. We use it predominantly for all of our virtual programs where we either require or ask for registration, just because it does help to kind of not only gauge the interest, but you're able to send that Zoom link out and send reminders too. And with Zoom, we utilized several aspects of Zoom for this particular program. Upon entry, everyone was muted, and all of the participants did remain muted while introductions were given, as well as during Mike's initial talk. And Mike was made the co-host, so he was able to, have all of the authority that a host would have, but the library, we at the library, we were the ones who were facilitating and monitoring everything else. And then also, when it came time for people to share their items, I was then in charge of unmuting and muting the people who were sharing, as well as managing any chat questions or comments that would come through. And so you're probably wondering, kind of what was the process of this whole thing, doing it virtually, doing it through Zoom. So what was suggested was that we let people in from the Zoom waiting room roughly 15 minutes prior to the program beginning. So again, our program began at 6 o'clock, so we opened up the waiting room at about 5:45. And that gave Mike the extra opportunity to have people hold up their items as they entered from the waiting room. And that could even just give an extra brief overview of what some of the items were to come. And, during the introduction, I, of course, thanked our friends group, talked about upcoming programs, and then just kind of talked a little bit about Mike and his background and what the program would entail. And kind of from that point on, I turned it over to our appraiser, Mike, and he talked about the several aspects of the appraisal process, what goes into appraising, what tools and insight you can look for, helpful resources for appraisals, and just kind of things of that nature. And he also talked about some different factors that will always impact the value of your treasures, and kind of keeping that in mind when going to appraisers in the future, or even during your own research. And then throughout the program, even when people were sharing, Mike would talk about buying and selling tips and strategies that people could keep in mind for any of the items that they do have or would have in the future. And so once he was done giving his kind of introductory presentation about, the appraisal process and the background, then we went into the one-on-one sharing and letting everyone be able to show the items that they had. So with the one-on-one appraisals, due to the nature of the program, it being virtual and also having a limited time frame, we did have a certain number of attendees that could share items. As I mentioned earlier, we did have it open for anyone to just simply view the program and enjoy it. That number was, for all intents and purposes, it was unlimited. But for the amount of people that could share 1 to 2 items, we did limit that to about 20. I believe we had a couple extra register, just because I like to leave registration open a little bit past what the capacity is, because a lot of times not everyone who registers comes, sometimes things come up. But as per Mike's recommendation as well, it typically takes 2 to 3 minutes per appraisal. So you're generally limited to 1 to 2 items per person. So if you have a smaller group, such as 20 or fewer, it works well to have, 2 items at least per person. And the order of appraisals was at my discretion. So what I did was I just went down the list of registrants from, whoever had registered first, and then kind of continuing down that list. Plus, having that list available of the additional people who had registered and kind of put an item on their list just in case we had space that would allow for that. So I had both of those lists in front of me, and I would introduce the person who was sharing. I would mention what they would be sharing so everyone could kind of have an idea ahead of time. And then I would invite them to unmute and ask them to turn on their video if it wasn't already on. And Mike would remain unmuted and on video the entire time, which was really helpful. But then the person who I had unmuted, they would share their item, they would talk about it, they would show it. Mike would do his appraisal process for that item. And then once a patron was done with their particular appraisal, I would mute them again. And then I would invite the next sharer to unmute and introduce, them and what they would be sharing. So it was really just kind of a nice repetitive process. It was actually very smooth sailing. We really didn't have problems with, the unmuting or the muting process. We only had one patron unmuted at a time, so that made for, a lot of an easier transition, and not having a ton of, white noise coming from the background of other people's videos either. So that was really helpful. And, you might be wondering, well, if you're not in person, you can't hold the item. It's a little bit more difficult to see it. So it was mentioned, that the camera positioning, it was important. You would have to make sure to hold the item up close enough to the camera where you could see some of the detail, but without having it so close to where it would distort it. It is helpful to be able to hold an item in person, but you'd actually be surprised as to how nice it is and how easy it is to be able to see an item pretty clearly, even virtually through Zoom. And since he couldn't see some items in person, there were some times where he would ask questions about, particular markings, kind of confirming about the condition of things. And he definitely used his insight and his experience, from prior years to make, certain conclusions about what an item might be worth. And it had been recommended also for participants to have a backup item. That way, if he couldn't virtually appraise their primary item, he could appraise their second one. And something else, if you ever do decide to do a virtual appraisal program, it's been noted that having a virtual background can kind of distort how items look. So it's best to not have, one of those fun virtual backgrounds in your background when you're trying to show an item. And so we did receive some really good feedback from the registrants that we had. We did allow for people to unmute themselves at the very end if they wanted to ask questions or if they had comments. We also had the chat box available for people to ask questions if they didn't want to unmute or speak. And people were able to, ask some really good questions regarding appraisals and the whole process of it. We weren't able to do any additional appraisals at that time specifically, but just general questions, regarding appraisals and auctions. It was a great way for people to kind of get those questions, that maybe have been swimming around in their brain, just kind of bouncing those off of someone who had some really great experience. And then one thing that, also additionally, we did receive some emails from participants mentioning that it was fun, that it was insightful. But one thing that I would do for the future, prior to the pandemic, we would always have comment cards available for in-person programming. And for some reason, I did not think to have comment cards or a survey available for this virtual program. And so that's something that I would definitely do in the future, and I would recommend for anyone to do, whether it's through Zoom or through an external source like SurveyMonkey, because it really could help to garner, even more feedback, even more so from people, doing chat messages or emails. So that's something I would absolutely recommend. And, just kind of wondering, would you repeat the program in the future? I think that we definitely would. For us, it was kind of a one-time program. It wasn't something that we were, we weren't going to be scheduling additional appraisal programs every year. It was kind of just a fun thing that kind of came out of thin air. It was a wonderful program that happened upon us, but I think that we would absolutely do it again. You know, working with Mike Ivankovich was wonderful. I can also share his email with you in the chat. I'll do that in a second. But he was really great to work with. We had a really positive experience and a positive outcome overall. Really, you know, the only, I wouldn't necessarily call it an issue per se, but it could be maybe seen as an issue or concern, is that some of the items that were shared, you know, I think everyone might be thinking their item is worth more than maybe what it is. I think a lot of times people, there's a lot of sentimental value, a lot of family value, and that was something that I noticed with you know, certain items. It was more had more family worth than monetary value. But really, you know, that isn't even a huge concern. Everyone had a great time being able to share their items and just to see what everyone else had too. And we did have a great, you know, range of ages. It was predominantly an older crowd, but we also had some young adults as well share some items. And so it was kind of a cool learning process, even just learning, you know, the appraisal process in general. So I definitely would recommend, you know, having an appraisal program at a library, whether it's in person or virtual. I think they both have, you know, pros. So it'd be something to absolutely test out. But I'll share Mike's email in the chat, and then I'll also share a website that he has, and you can feel free to take a peek at those. And then also I'll just put my email in the chat just in case anyone has any questions that they think of later on. But that kind of just sums it up. You know, I definitely recommend having an appraisal program. It is really fun, and it's something that, you know, not necessarily a lot of people have access to, and it gives them a chance to kind of gain some insight or history into the appraisal process and into some of the items that they have. You know, they might learn something new about an item that they would have never known before. And it's just really just kind of a fun community event to have. So I would definitely recommend it, and we really did have a great experience overall. But thank you again for having me today. Thank you, Charlie, and for everyone. I really appreciate it. And feel free, if you have any questions, you know, let me know.
Yeah, feel free to chat in questions for Mallory. Thank you so much, Mallory. You did a great job as well, and both of our presenters' first times doing webinar presentations, so big round of applause for you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you basically were a webinar host when you did this program, so it sounds like lots of muting and unmuting and talking, and so that gave you some good practice.
Yes, and you know what's cool is I tell you, it really actually was very smooth. You might be thinking, oh, it'd be a lot of, you know, it can be kind of daunting having to mute and unmute everyone, making sure everyone is not overpowering another speaker. It actually was really, really, you know, it happened very nicely. It was very smooth, and I would absolutely do it again.
Awesome. That was actually going to be one of my questions, if you were going to do it again, so hopefully in the future.
Thank you, Charlie. It was nice being here and talking with everybody, and I especially enjoyed hers being virtual. So
yes, thank you so much, Charlene. Real quick wrap up. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say I very much enjoyed Charlene's presentation. I think that's such an awesome thing to have annually. I mean, what an amazing event. Very cool. Kudos to you all.
Same here.
We'll do a quick wrap up, and just everybody, if you have any final questions, go ahead and chat those in while I'm doing our wrap up. We thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services for their sponsorship of this webinar and our services at KDLA. And this webinar was recorded, and it will be available within the next few days in our online learning portal, and you all will get an email about that when it's available. And I'm going to go ahead and pop in a survey about the webinar to the chat. Just a real quick 4-question survey, if you wouldn't mind letting us know what you think. It's very important to us in our continued federal funding. And a reminder that the slides for today are available in Blackboard Learn under the PDFs and Slides folder. And for those of you who attended live, you'll be getting your certificate of attendance within the next few days as well. Look for that in your learner dashboard. Okay, and that's all I have. So thank you to Mallory and Charlene again. I'm not seeing any additional questions come in, but again, feel free to contact our presenters if you think of anything. And thank you all so much. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you, Charlene.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.